Baxter, horror and dark fantasy, crime, whatever genre you like, author. Brad Proctor asked me if I'd do a read for his 31 Days of Horror series. And what a fantastic idea, what a tremendous series that sounds like. So I'm more than happy to do a read. I'm going to read some from the start of quite a new story. It's called Nurturing His Nature. It was in the Bad Book, an anthology called The Bad Book, edited by John F. D. Taff, that came out just recently. It's a fantastic anthology. I'm very happy to be part of it. This story features a character from another story of mine, which was quite a popular story from my second collection called Served Cold. And this story also reveals that this story and that story from Served Cold are both set in a town just down the road from the Gulp. So there's that connection as well. I'm just going to read for a few minutes from the start. This story is called Nurturing His Nature. Darkness hides a multitude of sins. If Drew Hancock had a motto, that was probably it. He smiled as he sinned, his orthodontically straightened teeth no doubt the only glimmer in the wan moonlight leaking through the trees. A weak mule from the cat as its life fled, and Drew sat back with a satisfied sigh. A sexual sigh, the thrill of his desecration pressing against the front of his jeans after a few minutes basking in the glow of his ministrations. His exultant high slowly eased back as it always did. With an altogether less satisfied sigh, Drew dug into the soft, loamy ground and buried the mutilated remains. Cats went missing all the time, that's what made them so useful. The twin girls 4 doors down from his house would be distressed and grief-stricken for a while, but their parents would probably buy a new kitten to console them. Drew smiled crookedly, wondering how long he'd be able to resist bringing that one into this dry bush behind his sprawl of tract housing. It wasn't his fault he was made this way. He stood and started picking his way back through the gum trees and low scrub towards a path that would eventually lead him to the closed end of the cul-de-sac where he lived. A piece of Oz all our own, his dad had proudly said once, which was ridiculous because some arbitrary patch of land with a house on it was hardly a bit of land all their own. The council had rules about what they could do with it. There were neighbours either side and across the street, only too ready to twitch a curtain and report the slightest thing out of the ordinary. And ordinary was so hellishly boring. Drew hated how many rules and regulations existed to corral everyone into towing the line. He was stifled by everything around him, but he did occasionally find his little outlets, his moments of joy. He'd recently turned 18, and there were only a few months left of high school. Then he could tell everyone to go and get fucked, and he would get out. Find a smaller town somewhere more remote, an easy job. Something to make money enough to cover a cheap rent, a place with lots of space and few prying eyes, where he could indulge his proclivities. The further a person went from civilization, Drew had decided, the more they could live as their true self. A silhouette caught his eye and he gasped, stopped dead in his tracks. Drew was only 100 metres or so from the narrow path that ran along the back of his housing estate. He saw a glow from the street lights and even a few lit windows like bright square eyes in the dark. But the silhouette stood in deep shadow, just beyond the light leaking over the path. A man, a little overweight, probably similar height to Drew himself, and absolutely motionless. Drew blinked. Must be a trick of the shadows. He moved slightly and lost sight of the man, the trunks of the blue gums becoming a dark mass again. A smile started to form, Drew chastising himself for paranoia, when movement made his heart thump an extra beat. The man had stepped to one side to put himself back in Drew's eye line, then stopped still once more. He wanted to be seen. Drew felt as though he were on a knife edge of action. 2 futures lay ahead of him. In one, he approached the figure and took his chances with whatever ensued. But it could be a madman. He might have a knife, or worse. Drew looked down at his hand. He had a knife too, sticky with cat blood. It was razor sharp, but only small, a 3-inch bladed folding penknife. It was for controlled action, surgical almost, not fighting. In the other future, Drew ran the hell away and got indoors, safe from this stranger. Drew wasn't really a fighter, though he was fit and worked on the heavy bag in the garage quite often, but he didn't like unpredictable violence. He ran. Bursting from the bush into the street was like stepping between worlds, the sudden asphalt and streetlight instantly surrounded by habitation instead of nature. Drew's trainers slapped the pavement as he ran about 100 metres up to his place. Another 100 metres led to a bigger road, and that snaked to an even bigger road, and that led to the main road right into Moncton. So much better to be in the suburbs, his parents insisted, where people were still neighbourly. They were just like all the other busybodies, but right now Drew decided the close proximity of everyone was a blessing. He didn't dare to look back to see if the stranger was following, but ran straight up the driveway in the side gate, then slowed and paced calmly around the back door. He opened it quietly, stepped into the kitchen. It was nearly midnight. His parents would have been in bed a couple of hours. But of course Shana was there. She leaned against the kitchen sink, smirking at him, 16 years of sarcasm and derision. "Where you been?" Drew closed the door, took a breath to steady himself. He was gassed from the sudden sprint, sweat on his brow, trickling down his back. Only early spring, but already the nights were warming up, unseasonably so, in fact. "Out? Why are you so out of breath? Scared of the dark?" "Yeah, little sis, I'm jumping at shadows." She laughed and he grinned. They got on pretty well most of the time. If nothing else, they were united in their disdain of their parents. How two such complex kids could be emitted by such boring adults was a constant mystery to them both. "Seriously, why are you running?" Just felt like it. Feels good to exercise." She shrugged. "I guess." Drew realised she had makeup on. She hadn't been around when he'd gone out. "Where have you been?" "Sucking Trey Abbott's dick." Drew grimaced. "Jesus, Shana." "What? He likes it and he buys me stuff when I do it. You going to say I'm too young?" "Legally, no. You're 16 now, but what's Trey, 21? Shana raised an eyebrow, tipped her head to one side. "You're sounding a little like Dad right now." Drew laughed. "Get fucked. Hey, you do what you want, sis. Just be careful, yeah?" "Of course. I'm going to bed." "Night." Drew walked past her, heading for his room. 19, Shana said as he headed down the hall. "What?" "Trey's 19. He smiled, nodded. He hoped someone was sucking his dick by the time he was 19. He could wait another year if he had to, but maybe not much longer. He was always nervous and clumsy around girls, and it seemed most girls found him a little weird. He was a subject of ridicule more often than adulation. He'd had a few embarrassing fumbles over the last few years, but nothing close to what might be considered sex. A few groping sessions here and there. Once, about a year before, he'd blown his load in his jeans, rubbing against Carly Jackson's thigh as they kissed in the park behind Moncton Tavern. That hardly counted. She didn't even realise. Or maybe she did, but she didn't say anything. She'd let him rub himself against her, at least. Now she was off with Tony Paletto, probably giving him blowjobs. The curtains in Drew's room were open, and he saw the man standing in the pool of streetlight outside. Drew froze, staring. He would be framed in the light from the hallway behind him. The stranger must be able to see. What else had he seen? Had he watched what Drew did to the cat? Had he hidden there, observed all of it? If so, why hadn't he said anything? Done anything? Shaking started in Drew's hands and knees. The stranger was motionless, staring for what seemed like minutes on end, but was probably less. Drew jumped as the stranger raised one hand in a slow wave, then turned and strolled away along the street. Drew ran to the window, pressed his face against the glass to watch. The stranger got to the end of the cul-de-sac, then turned towards Moncton and kept walking. Whatever he'd seen, one thing was certain. He knew where Drew lived, and he obviously wanted Drew to know that he knew. Shaken to the core, Drew got ready for bed, thinking he wouldn't sleep for hours, if at all. The buzz from the fun in the bush had drained away entirely. And that's the start of a story called Nurturing His Nature. An entirely unpleasant story, as is probably quite clear already. Published in The Bad Book, edited by John F. D. Teff. You find it everywhere you'd normally buy books, along with anything else by me. Feel free to look it up. And if you want to have a chat, you'll find me on Twitter at Alan Baxter is my handle, or alanbaxter.com.au for my website. Come and check things out. Thanks, Brad, for making me part of your 31 Days of Horror series. It's a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to listening to 30 other readings from a whole variety of people, I'm sure. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Happy Halloween.